Today, I'm going to be talking about AI in healthcare. And in particular, what I wanted to do was give you a very practical example of the work that we've done, which emphasizes the human agency involved in the preparation of AI, as well as giving a very practical example of where AI can help in creating new treatments for disease. This was a project which we did with several partners. We worked closely with two patient advocacy groups that are seeking a cure for a disease called chronic pancreatitis. And we also worked with the Pistoai Alliance, which is a collaborative group of the world's top pharma companies. And we put together a team using the Elsevier's curated data, some third-party data on our AI platform. And this was a team of medical experts and data scientists. And I think what I want to do is really emphasize that AI is all about collaborative human endeavor using data science. Now, just to give you a little bit of context to this work, we were looking at drug repurposing for this particular disease, chronic pancreatitis. And that is where you find a drug that's currently used for a different disease condition and identify that it is a suitable treatment for the disease that you're looking at. Reasons for doing this is, as you can see here from this graphic, it's highly successful compared to new drug development. You have a known safety profile. The drug has already been tested for adverse events, so you're aware of the context there. It allows you to get a drug to market much, much quicker. And also the costs are greatly reduced with this approach. Now, the project that we worked on was, as I say, for chronic pancreatitis. This is a very nasty condition. It affects in the region of 1 million sufferers worldwide, including large numbers of children. And it is an extremely painful condition. Currently, there is no effective treatment and no cure. So what I'm going to do in the rest of my talk today is talk about the human agency in the various steps in delivering an AI solution. Now, as Ava was saying earlier, the first step is really about data preparation. It's actually bringing data together and ensuring that it can speak across the different sources, that you have the right dictionaries, and that all of the data can be normalized together in one data organization. The second step is, once you have brought all of that data together in your repository for the data, you need to interlink it. You need to build what we call a knowledge graph, which is allowing you to look at the data from different perspectives. With AI, it's all about building an information space around your particular area of research. And so building a knowledge graph allows you to get an overview of that data in order to work with it further. The third step is making it what we call AI ready. So machine learning algorithms have to have data in ones and zeros as vectors. So you have to process the data from your knowledge graph to simplify it so that it can be used within machine learning. And the fourth step is to create your artificial neural network, to train your network with machine learning. And for that, you need to select the right algorithm. So each of these steps requires human agency. It requires your data scientists and your experts to engage with the data as it's processed through to delivering the AI outcome. And the fifth step is putting this AI tool in the hands of the experts. So doing it in a transparent way that the experts can understand the tool. And I'll talk about how we go about doing that. So that's the context that I wanted to speak about today. So the first step, so we made available to the participants of what we call this data film, this collaborative project, a huge amount of data from the Elsevier data sources and the third-party source. Pathway Studio is a biology database which is curated from scientific literature. Reactis is a chemistry database, again, curated from the scientific literature, and a pharmapendium is a collection of adverse events information about drugs which have been used in the market. Now, what we did is we worked with the medical experts to identify the disease causing genetic profiles, the genes that were responsible for causing this disease, and modifying it. And so we filtered this large amount of data based on the known gene association. So that was the first step. Now, this created a very complex, detailed knowledge graph. You can see on the left-hand side all of the connections there that were in the data. So the second step, what we then did is we simplified it. On the right-hand side, you can see the data model that the team came up with, which talks about the compound, the disease, the protein, that's the human biology element that the drugs act upon, and the disease area itself. The third step was to make this data AI ready. And there are three broad strategies for drug repurposing. The first is predicting new drivers of the disease. So that's understanding the biology, what proteins and genes are associated with the disease and actually cause the disease. That's the first approach. The second approach is looking for what we call off-target drug interaction. So a drug acts upon a protein in the body. That typically is one that's involved in the disease you're trying to treat, but it might have other interactions with other proteins. And what you're looking to do with drug repurposing is find those other proteins that it reacts with and that can cure or treat the disease that you are interested in. So that's really what we were looking for with this exercise. And the third strategy is the more broad-based one, where you can look at the compound and look by any mechanism, does it have an impact on the disease? We were focusing on the second strategy, and this is how we took the data from the knowledge graph and made it AI ready. We simplified the data. Now, essentially what we did is we took that data, as I say, into vectors for proteins, which are the biological elements that we're seeking to impact in curing the disease, and the drugs, the molecular descriptions, the chemicals. So we also, as well as taking those and making them into vectors, we also took the drug target interaction. So that's the known data in our massive knowledge graph, which took around about 8 million potential interactions between all of the drugs and all of the biological proteins. And we looked at the known interactions. And from that pattern, the machine learning was able to look at the potential interactions that are currently not in the scientific literature. So it was predicting the likelihood that a drug might interact with a protein that we were interested in. The fifth step is making this transparent for the scientific medical experts. And part of this process is using what we call corroborative analysis. So we took additional analysis. We looked at gene expression profiles. So this is data from a tissue in a petri dish, having the drug put into the dish, and you look at what impact that has on the genes expressed in that tissue. So it's a different mechanism. And when you look at that and you say, okay, well, this drug appears to interact with this gene, you can say, okay, well, this is a corroborative insight that we can bring to bear. The other method was looking at adverse events. So if a drug is known to have an adverse event and cause some condition, that tells you something about the mechanism of action of that drug. And you can use that to look back at your AI output and say, okay, this looks like it makes sense. And out of all of this data, we ranked the drugs which looked the most promising, and top of that list was a drug called Lacosamide. Now, Lacosamide was known to be effective in pain, reducing pain through its biological targets. What was not known was that potentially it can also bind to the biological elements that are known to be active in this disease of chronic pancreatitis. So all of these steps in the data science led us to our AI system, which was able to make recommendations to the medical experts, and they were involved in this process, which took several months. And at every step, human agency was active. But what this did do is allow us to generate new insights from this large amount of data, as I say, over 8 million potential interactions. And this, with our partners, is now something which is going to be reviewed in a clinical trial, which again brings that human agency and oversight into the AI process. Just to put this in context, Mission Cure, they're working with a huge number of patients here. And as I say, this condition affects children as well as adults. And I think it certainly, from my point of view, really gives the sense of the societal impact that these technologies can have if it's able to bring cures to these sufferers of this disease. So hopefully that gives you both an insight to the potential for AI to have a positive societal impact, but also the fact that the process, the data science associated with this, has human agency at every step of this process, and the importance of the data, and the data which Elsevier was able to bring to this exercise.